Hi, Terry here from Stamping Magic. Welcome back to my channel. Today's project is a shaker card. I've used the Seize the Day stamp set together with the coordinating C dies. Now this is a super simple card, so let's get started. These are all the measurements you need for all the elements required to create this project. So if you're interested in reproducing it, take a screenshot so you can refer to it later. I have two mats here. The basic white one will be for the inside of the shaker, and that's what I'll stamp on. And the Coastal Cabana one will be for the outside, for the frame. Now I've cut the basic white mat so it's just a tiny bit smaller than the Coastal Cabana one. Now I'm going to stamp both of these with the Gentle Wave stamp, and because this is a landscape stamp I'm going to have to do it twice. I'm going to use Coastal Cabana ink. So starting with the Coastal Cabana mat, which will be my frame, I'll ink up the stamp. And then I'm going to lay the mat on top of the stamp. It's easier to do this with large stamps and then you can get them straight. And then just taking a piece of scrap paper, I'm going to smooth that all over. So that's the majority of my mat stamped. I just need to do that top section next. So inking up the top section of my stamp. Now I'm going to take a cloth and just remove some of the ink towards the bottom. I don't want any sort of harsh lines, or I don't want it being too dark in a certain area. So I'm going to lay my mat towards the top of the stamp, again using that scrap paper just to smooth it all over. And that's my Coastal Cabana mat finished. Now I'm going to do a similar thing for the basic white mat, so I'll ink up my stamp. Now I want this to be really pale, so the stamping I'm going to do on top is going to stand out really well. So I'm going to stamp this off onto scrap paper twice before I lay my white mat on top of the stamp, again smoothing it over with scrap paper. And you can see how pale that is. So it's just to add a touch of colour. And then I'll ink up the top of the stamp again. I don't need to remove any ink this time because I'm going to stamp it off twice again. So the tone is going to be very light. And then I can lay my mat along the top of the stamp just to fill in that white space. Again, giving it a good smooth over. I'll do the stamping on my white mat in a minute. I want to cut the frame into the Coastal Cabana mat first, and I'm using one of the C dies to do this, and it's this large die. Now I'm just going to place it centrally onto my mat and then run it through my die cutting machine. And it cuts this beautiful frame. You just want to make sure all the little pieces are popped out. Now this is the Seize the Day stamp set, and I'm using several of the images and one of the sentiments today. The ink pads I'm using are Memento Tuxedo Black, Orchid Oasis, Polished Pink, Calypso Coral, and you'll see me use Coastal Cabana as well. The Orchid Oasis pad is a new ink pad, and I'm going to prep it before I use it to remove some of the ink from the surface. And I just do this by running an old bone folder over the top of the pad very gently to press the ink deeper into it. The sentiment will be stamped using Memento Tuxedo black ink, and I'm going to stamp it, allowing enough room around it so I can die cut a circle. The starfish will be in Calypso Coral. Now everything else will be stamped on the mat that's going inside the shaker. So I'm going to use my frame as a guide. I want to stamp 2 jellyfish, both in Orchid Oasis, one at the top and one towards the bottom of the frame. I'm going to stamp a starfish using Calypso Coral in the bottom right of the frame. Now once the sentiment's in place, most of this won't be seen, but you'll just catch a glimpse of it when the card is tilted. And then I'm also going to stamp a crab in Calypso Coral at the top left corner. Next I'm going to stamp the fish, and I want to stamp him 4 times, and it's the fish facing towards the right. You've got one facing right and one facing left. The left one I'm not using today. So again, I'm using the frame just to help me position each of the fish, and these are in polished pink. To fill in the spaces in between each of the images, I'm just going to go over with the little bubble stamp. I'm using Coastal Cabana ink, and I'm stamping it off each time because I don't want it too dark. And this will just fill in all the gaps. This is the mat for the inside of the card. This is where you'll write your message, and I just want to do a little stamping on it so it's not completely plain. And because I love the Orchid Oasis colour so much, I'm going to stamp 2 of the jellyfish. The sentiment will be die cut using one of the Tasteful Labels dies, and it's this larger circle. The starfish will be die cut using the coordinating outline die from the C dies set. I've gone ahead and added dimensionals to both the sentiment mat and the little starfish, and I've also die cut 2 of these seaweed elements, and I used another of the dies from the C die set, and these are in Calypso Coral. Now I'm going to use my dark Calypso Coral Stamping Blends alcohol marker just to add a little extra colour onto each of these. And I'm just going over the little cuts, and I need to do this about 3 times so they show up. I'm now going to add some acetate behind my frame. Now I've cut the acetate again so it's just a tiny bit smaller than my frame, and this just ensures that the edges don't show. Gives me a little wiggle room. Now I'm using a strong tape adhesive to attach the acetate, and this one is 1/8 of an inch wide. I can then remove the backing from all the tape and then position the acetate on the reverse of my frame. And you want to give it a good press down so it's nice and secure. I'm going to use some of our foam adhesive strips to create the gap that the shaker needs and also attach it to the frame. I'm laying the strips onto the stamped mat and I'm positioning them just a tiny bit in from the edges. Now when you add your tape, you want to try and add it in 1 strip for each side if you can, because these edges will show. Now I was a little short on the one at the top, but never mind. Now for the shaker element, I'm using some of our effervescent elements, and these are beautiful iridescent balls. and they're all different sizes. You don't want to use too many of the bigger ones because they're about the same size as the depth of the foam strips, but a few will be fine. Make sure you peel off all the backing to the foam strips, and then you can position your frame onto your stamped panel. And you want to give it a really good press down over that foam tape. You don't want this to lift off. Now there are a couple of pieces on the frame that lift up and they could catch on something. So I'm just going to make sure these are secured down with some rolled up glue dots. My card base is in basic black, and this is half a standard sheet of card, scored in the middle and folded to create a portrait card. Then for the front of the card I've got my shaker element, and for inside the card I've got my basic white mat that I've stamped, and then I've got the other elements I've created. And that's my Seize the Day shaker card complete. And it was super easy to make. Here's another look at my original one. It's pretty much identical to my new one. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notifications bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Bye for now.